Hi everyone, so we're only about 17 videos or something into my channel, and it's of no great surprise to me that we've reached the topic of microbiome, leaky gut, and all things gut health. Now, I'm definitely not going to touch on everything in today's video because the topic itself is literally ginormous and it's really growing rapidly every day. There's so much more interest in this area. Not even really just in the medical profession. If anything, the medical profession at the moment, in my opinion, is a little behind on all of this and needs to be doing some catching up. There's so much science out there, and it's really, I think, more the wellness and practitioner space that's really leading on this rather than your sort of traditional Western doctor. So I'm hoping to fill that gap a little bit for you today and just talk a little bit about leaky gut. So this term is out there. Doesn't sound great. What on earth is a leaky gut, and do I have one, or do you have one? Look, leaky gut, I think that there is probably a large proportion of people out there that are potentially suffering with this problem, and it could be getting labeled a whole bunch of other things, from irritable bowel syndrome, just symptoms of bloating and gas, right through to symptoms of celiac disease, which is a real disease and does require a real true diagnosis. But there's a whole spectrum in there of bowel symptoms that many of us are actually normalizing on a day-to-day basis, or have literally just gotten used to having as part of our lives, and we're not recognizing that it's actually abnormal to be experiencing some of these symptoms. So what are some of these symptoms? Some of them are pretty obvious when you think about your gut health. So things like bloating and gas, irregularity in your bowel movements, so whether you're having too many movements in a day or not enough movements in a day. Also more subtle symptoms such as just afternoon sleepiness. Maybe you feel a little bit drained after certain foods. Maybe you get a rash after certain foods. Maybe you get headaches after certain foods. All of these things can actually point to a leaky gut and other problems associated with leaky gut, such as small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO, and Candida overgrowth, which is a yeast. So we do have Candida in our body, and a lot of these bacteria that are causing problems are actually supposed to be there, but they've ended up in the wrong place, or there's just too much of them, or maybe it's a little bit of both. So how is leaky gut, SIBO, Candida overgrowth, all of these things actually caused? It's a really complex process, and it certainly doesn't happen overnight, and it's multifactorial without a doubt. Some of the more common culprits that people may not be aware of, antibiotics obviously are one of them. Now, I'm not here to preach that antibiotics are bad. They can really be life-saving medicines, but we've become overly reliant on them, particularly in Western medicine, and they are definitely being used and abused out there, and it's causing a lot more harm than good in many situations. So if you have had a course of antibiotics, antibiotics don't really discriminate in many regards when they're taken orally. So you are going to wipe out, to some extent, your natural microbiome, and that does need to be revived. If you've wiped out your natural microbiome, that leaves capacity for more pathogenic styles of bacteria to actually overgrow or become in excess, because that balance is lacking. Another big one is stress, of course. Stress is getting blamed for everything, but this is really, really quite a big problem, and it's all to do with the gut-brain connection. So the gut and the brain are no doubt connected. We're still trying to understand the science behind all of this, but if you are at the burden of chronic stress, your gut is also being impacted by that stress. And that's not something we can usually fix overnight, but there's so many modalities to try and start obliterating your stress. My previous video, 5 stress busters, check that one out. There's some great options in there. But I'll talk about stress a lot more on this channel because it's a huge problem, and it's actually the #1 health epidemic that the World Health Organization has estimated for the 20th century. So I should say the 21st century. So that's something that we really, really need to take seriously and consider a lot more in our lives, because it's impacting your gut for sure. Another one that a lot of people aren't aware of, and I really only learnt this myself probably in the last few months is the role of the oral contraceptive pill. I'm sorry, ladies, there are so many of us out there that are on the pill. It has been prescribed extensively, really since the 50s in some way, shape or form to women. It has been groundbreaking, and it's given women a lot more freedom in their work-life balance and family planning. However, it is a pharmaceutical drug, and it has been shown that it is causing some problems with leaky gut and just really degrading the overall gut health, making it vulnerable. So how does the gut become leaky? What does the leaky aspect mean? We're mainly referring to the small intestine. And what happens is the small intestine normally, its job is to actually not digest your food, but get all the nutrition from your food, which is within the bowel itself, and absorb that across into the bloodstream. So it's really important that it's healthy, because all of the cells need to be nicely lined up and have these tight junctions, we call them, so that no big food particles are actually getting directly into the bloodstream. The absorption needs to be controlled and taken care of. And what happens is, as the cells get degraded, diseased, break down from those mechanisms I've already mentioned, those tight junctions between the cells start to open up because the cell integrity is getting lost. So it's no longer robust, and that's where we can start having these problems with leaky gut. So essentially what can happen is, rather than this beautiful intact membrane really tightly controlling what is getting absorbed into your bloodstream, these large holes essentially in the bowel wall are permitting whole food particles in some regards. Now, the bloodstream, it's not supposed to have whole food particles like gluten and casein, the dairy protein, and egg protein in the bloodstream. The immune system is going to see that, and the immune system is going to be really unhappy, particularly with those sorts of foods. They really promote quite a strong immune system response. Now, this is different to an actual food allergy. This is a food sensitivity. So that's another complexity that I will get into in just a moment. But I want you to just imagine the gut wall is broken down, so these whole food particles potentially are getting into the bloodstream and causing an immune response, a food sensitivity response. So we call this an IgG response in the immune world, rather than the classic IgE response, which is your anaphylactic true food allergy. So interestingly, that's kind of part of the reason why out there so many people are starting to get, oh, I'm sensitive to gluten, I'm sensitive to wheat. They didn't used to be, they grew up eating these foods, but suddenly they are. And it's not an accident that we're hearing more about this, because the proliferation of leaky gut is definitely growing in the population for a whole range of reasons. So what can happen as well is, with stress, we have got a connection between our large bowel, our colon, and our small bowel. So that connection is essentially a junction or a sphincter in itself. Now, that sphincter is very susceptible to stress. So when you are stressed, that sphincter actually starts to be relaxed too often. So when you're stressed, sphincter is relaxed. Sounds a little bit counterintuitive. But when that particular connection between the large bowel and the small bowel is starting to relax too frequently, it's actually permitting the colon bacteria, which is very specific and very much needs to stay in the colon, it can start migrating into the vulnerable small bowel, particularly if the microbiome population there has started to degrade and become unhealthy. It's opportunistic for the colon bacteria to start migrating, and this is called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. This is a big problem. The colon bacteria is not designed to be in your small intestine, which is a much more, I guess, sterile environment in comparison to the colon. Those two sections of bowel have very different roles. So if you're getting colon bacteria in your small intestine, big problems. It can happen very slowly over time, and it's something that we really need to remedy with a gut cleansing and gut healing protocol, which I will talk about in a future video. Now, the other thing that's going on is inflammation. So if you've got a lot of stress, if you're eating a very inflammatory diet, you're also making your bowel much more vulnerable to becoming symptomatic with leaky gut and small intestinal bacterial overgrowth and candida overgrowth. Now, the other interesting thing is your microbiome dictates in a large part your food cravings, because whether you like it or not, for every one cell that's human in your body, there are 10 bacterial cells. So we're actually more bug than human. It's kind of freaky, but we exist collectively with each other in a healthy way. So we need to work together. It's not about eradicating bacteria entirely. We need that bacteria because it's breaking down our food. It's actually helping synthesize vitamins that we need, like B12. Bacteria is required for that. So it's not about getting rid of bacteria. It's about keeping the right bacteria in the right place. And what you can observe is that if you have certain overgrowth, such as candida, which is a yeast, that can cause you to have really, really intense sugar and carbohydrate cravings, because that's what that particular yeast feeds off. So if you've got a lot of a particular type of bug, whatever that bug, that bacteria likes to eat, it's going to actually cause that food craving in your body because it needs to survive in order for you to survive. So it's pretty trippy, but it's also pretty amazing. And we need to start really respecting this relationship that we have with our microbiome. And in future videos, I'll be talking about this a whole lot more. So I hope you've learned something out of this video. It's a really, really huge area, and I encourage you to do a little bit more research and looking around on Google. Your general doctor may not really have this well in hand, and really it's a learning curve for them as well. So be patient with your doctor, and also just get the information for yourself. There's an enormous amount out there, and also stay tuned to this channel, because that's what I'm really loving to be able to do for you guys, is to be able to really assimilate this knowledge, get it out there to everyone that's interested, and make it a little bit more digestible, pardon the pun, and understandable. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. There is new content every week, and the great topics will just keep coming. If there's a particular topic you'd like to hear more about, please comment on my channel and I'll hopefully include it in future videos. Thanks for your time.